The sound of laughter echoed through the thin walls of our home office, but it wasn't the kind of laughter that warmed your heart. It was cold, calculating, and filled with a cruelty that made my blood run cold. I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand still reaching for the doorknob as I listened to my husband James talking to someone on speakerphone. "She has no idea what's coming," James said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. 5 years of marriage and she still thinks I actually respect her opinion about business. Sarah's been nothing but a pretty face at my side, playing house while I built everything we have. The woman's voice on the other end was just as cold. "Are you sure she won't fight for more in the divorce?" "Nicole, baby, trust me. Sarah doesn't even know how much our assets are worth. She's been so busy playing the perfect little housewife that she never bothered to learn about our finances. She'll probably ask for some tiny settlement and think she's being reasonable." My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Nicole. I knew that name. She was James's business partner, the woman he'd been working late with for months. The woman who called our house at odd hours with urgent business matters. The woman I'd smiled at during company parties while she looked at me with barely concealed pity. "What if she hires a good lawyer?" Nicole pressed. James laughed again, that same bitter sound that made my stomach turn. "With what money? She doesn't have her own accounts. Everything goes through me. She'll probably find some bargain lawyer who'll tell her to take whatever I offer. By the time this is over, she'll be lucky if she gets enough to rent a small apartment. And then we can finally be together properly," Nicole said, her voice turning soft and intimate. "I'm tired of hiding, James. I want to be the woman by your side at those business dinners, not sitting in the shadows while she plays dress up. Soon, love. Very soon. I'm meeting with my lawyer tomorrow to start the paperwork. Once Sarah signs those papers, she'll be out of my life forever, and you'll have everything you deserve." I backed away from the door slowly, my legs feeling like they might give out beneath me. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of supporting his dreams, entertaining his clients, being the perfect partner he needed to climb the social ladder. 5 years of believing that we were building something together. The worst part wasn't even the affair, though that cut deep enough. It was the way he talked about me like I was some kind of decoration, a pretty but empty-headed ornament that he could discard when he no longer needed me. He truly believed I was nothing without him. I made it to our bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed we'd shared for half a decade. The room looked the same as always, tasteful decor, expensive furniture, family photos that now seemed like lies. But everything felt different now. The life I thought I knew was crumbling around me. James had always been controlling about money. He insisted on handling all our finances because he was better with numbers. He said it was one less thing for me to worry about, that I should focus on making our home beautiful and supporting his career. I trusted him completely, believing that we were partners in every sense of the word. But as I sat there in the growing darkness, I realized that I'd been playing a role for years. The devoted wife, the perfect hostess, the woman who smiled and nodded while her husband made all the important decisions. I'd been so busy being what he wanted that I'd forgotten who I really was. The sound of footsteps in the hallway made me quickly wipe my eyes and pretend to be reading a magazine. James appeared in the doorway, his face wearing the same fake smile he perfected over the years. "Hey, sweetheart," he said, walking over to kiss my forehead. "Sorry I was on that call so long. You know how business can be." "Of course," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "I understand." He started getting ready for bed, chatting about his day like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just been planning my destruction with his mistress. Like he hadn't just revealed exactly how little he thought of me. "Oh, by the way," he said casually as he brushed his teeth, "I think we need to talk about some things tomorrow. There are some changes coming up that might affect us." "What kind of changes?" I asked, though I already knew. "Nothing major. Just some business restructuring. We'll figure it out together." Together. The word felt like a joke now. We'd never been together, not really. I'd been his accessory, his supporting character in the story of his success. But he was wrong about one thing. I wasn't as clueless as he thought. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while James slept peacefully beside me. His breathing was deep and regular, the sleep of someone with a clear conscience. Someone who didn't know that his entire world was about to change. Because while James thought he knew everything about me, there were things I'd never told him. Dreams I'd put on hold but never abandoned. Skills I'd developed in secret during those long afternoons when he thought I was just shopping or having lunch with friends. For the past 2 years, while he'd been building his affair with Nicole, I'd been building something of my own. Something he knew nothing about. Something that would change everything. As I listened to him sleep, I made a decision that would alter the course of both our lives. James wanted to play games with our marriage, to treat me like a pawn in his personal chess match. But he'd forgotten one important rule about games. Sometimes the pawn becomes the queen. The laughter I'd heard tonight would be the last time James underestimated me. Tomorrow I would start showing him exactly who Sarah really was. And by the time I was done, he would understand that the biggest mistake of his life wasn't just having an affair. It was thinking I was too weak to fight back. The morning after I overheard James's phone call, I woke up before dawn and made coffee in our pristine kitchen. Everything around me screamed of the life I'd built for him. The imported marble countertops he'd insisted on, the professional-grade appliances I'd researched for months to find, the fresh flowers I replaced twice a week to keep our home magazine perfect. But as I sat at our dining table, sipping coffee from china we'd received as wedding gifts, I let myself remember the woman I used to be. The woman I'd buried under layers of expectations and sacrifice. Before James, I'd been Sarah Mitchell, a business student with dreams bigger than the small town where I grew up. I'd graduated summa cum laude with a degree in business administration and a minor in computer science. I'd had internship offers from 3 major companies and a head full of ideas about starting my own tech consulting firm. Then I met James at a networking event during my final semester. He was already established in commercial real estate, 5 years older than me and confident in a way that made me feel like I could conquer the world at his side. He courted me with expensive dinners and weekend getaways, telling me I was brilliant and beautiful and everything he'd ever wanted. You could do anything, he used to say, but imagine what we could build together. What we built together turned out to be his empire and my exile from everything I'd once dreamed of becoming. The transition happened gradually. First, James suggested I delay my job search until after our wedding. Why stress yourself with a demanding career when you're planning the most important day of your life? Then, after the wedding, he convinced me to take a year off to settle into married life and help him expand his business. You're so good with people, he'd said. You could be my secret weapon in client relations. 1 year became 2, then 3. I became the perfect real estate wife, hosting dinner parties that landed James million-dollar deals, charming investor spouses while the men talked business, and making sure every detail of our life reflected the success he wanted the world to see. But I never stopped learning. While James thought I was spending my days shopping and getting my nails done, I was actually taking online courses in digital marketing, web development, and business strategy. I told him I was meeting friends for lunch, but I was really attending workshops on entrepreneurship and networking events for small business owners. He never asked for details about my days and I never offered them. As long as dinner was ready when he got home and I looked good at his business functions, James was happy to let me fill my time however I wanted. 2 years ago, everything changed. I was at one of those networking events James knew nothing about when I met Linda Rodriguez, a successful businesswoman who ran a digital marketing agency. She was looking for someone to help her expand into a new market, high-end real estate. I need someone who understands the luxury market, she'd said over coffee. Someone who knows how these clients think and what they want. Thanks to 5 years of living in James's world, I knew exactly what high-end real estate clients wanted. I knew their language, their expectations, their fears. I knew which marketing strategies would appeal to them and which would turn them off. I started working with Linda as a consultant, using my maiden name and setting up a separate business account James knew nothing about. At first, it was just a few hours a week, analyzing market trends and creating marketing strategies for luxury properties. But I had a gift for it. The psychology of luxury sales, the art of creating desire for properties that cost more than most people's lifetime earnings. It all came naturally to me. Within 6 months, I was Linda's most valuable consultant, and she offered me a partnership. I want to expand beyond just marketing, she said. I want to create a full-service luxury real estate consulting firm. You could head up the new division. I said yes without hesitation. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. I was using my brain, building something, creating value that had nothing to do with being James's wife. The business exploded. We started with luxury real estate marketing, but soon expanded into property staging, market analysis, and investment consulting. I developed proprietary software that helped investors identify undervalued luxury properties in emerging markets. I created marketing campaigns that sold million-dollar homes in weeks instead of months. Within a year, our firm had clients across 3 states. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined, but I kept it all separate from James. I had my own bank accounts, my own credit cards, my own financial advisor. I created a business identity that existed completely outside of my marriage. James never suspected anything. When I told him I was having lunch with friends, I was actually meeting with clients. When I said I was shopping, I was touring properties and developing investment strategies. When I claimed to be at the spa, I was in business meetings that were generating six-figure deals. The irony wasn't lost on me. James thought he was the real estate expert in our marriage, but I was quietly building a more successful business than he'd ever dreamed of. He dealt in local commercial properties worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was orchestrating deals involving luxury estates worth millions. But I never told him. Part of me was protecting my independence, but another part was protecting myself from his reaction. James needed to feel superior, needed to be the successful one in our marriage. If he'd known about my business, he would have either demanded to take control of it or forced me to shut it down. So I played the part he wanted me to play. I smiled and nodded when he explained basic real estate concepts to me as if I were a child. I let him believe he was the expert while I quietly revolutionized luxury property marketing. I attended his business dinners and played the supportive wife while building relationships with some of the wealthiest investors in the country. The hardest part was hiding my excitement. When I closed a deal that netted me a $250,000 commission, I had to come home and pretend I'd spent the day getting my hair done. When my software patent was approved, I had to celebrate silently while James complained about his slow month. But now, sitting in our kitchen the morning after his betrayal, I realized that all those years of secrecy had been preparing me for this moment. James thought he held all the cards in our marriage, but he'd been playing with a deck he didn't even know existed. I pulled out my phone and opened my business banking app. The numbers on the screen still sometimes surprised me. In 2 years, I'd built a consulting firm worth over $8 million. My personal net worth was approaching $10 million, and James had no idea any of it existed. He thought I was going to be devastated by our divorce, that I'd beg him to take me back or accept whatever scraps he offered. He thought I needed him to survive. He was about to learn just how wrong he'd been about everything. The signs had been there for months, but I'd chosen to ignore them. Looking back now, I could see the exact moment when James started pulling away from our marriage, though at the time I'd attributed it to work stress. It started with small things. James had always been affectionate in an absent-minded way, quick kisses when he left for work, his hand on my back when we walked into restaurants, casual touches that spoke of habit more than passion. But sometime last spring, even those routine gestures stopped. "Sorry babe, I'm distracted," he'd say when I tried to kiss him goodbye. "Big deal closing today." There was always a big deal closing. Always a crisis at work that required his complete attention. Always a reason why he couldn't be fully present in our marriage. Then came the phone calls. At first, they were during normal business hours, but gradually they started happening at dinner, during movies, even when we were supposed to be spending time together. "I have to take this," he'd say, stepping out of the room with an apologetic smile. "It's about the Johnson property." But I'd started noticing that these urgent calls often had nothing to do with any clients I knew about. And they were always with Nicole. Nicole Patterson had joined James's firm about a year ago. She was smart, ambitious, and beautiful in a sharp, professional way that made me feel soft and outdated in comparison. James had been excited about hiring her, saying she brought a fresh perspective to the business. "She's going to help us expand into the luxury market," he told me over dinner. "She has connections we've never had access to." I'd been happy for him. James had always wanted to move beyond strip malls and small office buildings into high-end commercial real estate. If Nicole could help him achieve that goal, I was all for it. The first time I met her was at the company's annual holiday party. She was everything James had described: polished, articulate, and clearly knowledgeable about the business. She shook my hand with a firm grip and smiled, but her eyes seemed to be evaluating me like a piece of property she was considering purchasing. "You must be so proud of James," she said. "He's told me so much about you." "All good things, I hope," I replied, trying to match her professional warmth. "Oh, absolutely. He says you're the perfect wife, beautiful, supportive, and content to let him focus on building the business." There was something in the way she said "content" that made me uncomfortable, but I pushed the feeling aside. I was probably just being oversensitive. Over the following months, Nicole became a constant presence in our lives, though always in the context of work. She and James started having regular strategy meetings at our house, spreading papers across our dining room table while I served them coffee and retreated to give them privacy. "Nicole has such innovative ideas," James would tell me afterward. "She's helping me see possibilities I never considered." I was glad he was excited about work again. For years, James had been restless, complaining that he was stuck in a rut with small-time deals. If Nicole could help him break into the next level, that was good for both of us. But then the late nights started. James had always worked long hours, but now he was staying at the office until 9 or 10 o'clock, sometimes later. When I called to ask about dinner, he'd sound distracted and rushed. "Don't wait up," he'd say. "Nicole and I are working on a presentation for the Morrison account. This could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." I started eating dinner alone most nights, keeping a plate warm for him in the oven. When he finally came home, he'd be too tired to talk, claiming he needed to shower and get to bed so he could be fresh for another long day. Our conversations became purely functional. Did he need his gray suit dry cleaned? What time was his dentist appointment? Could he pick up groceries on his way home? We talked like business partners managing a shared project, not like husband and wife. The intimacy disappeared gradually. James was always too tired, too stressed, or too preoccupied with work. When I tried to initiate physical contact, he'd give me a distracted kiss and mumble something about needing to review contracts. "Once this big deal closes, things will get back to normal," he'd promise. But there was always another big deal, another crisis, another reason why our marriage had to take a backseat to his career. I started to feel like I was living with a stranger. The man who used to ask about my day and listen to my thoughts had been replaced by someone who barely saw me as a person. I was part of the household infrastructure, like the furniture or the utilities, necessary for his comfort but not worthy of his attention. The worst part was how he started talking about me to other people. I'd overhear him on phone calls with clients, making jokes about his high-maintenance wife, who spent her days shopping and planning dinner parties. He'd laugh about how lucky he was that I didn't bother him with complicated questions about his business. "Sarah keeps me well-fed and well-dressed," he'd say. "That's all I need from home." It was like he'd reduced me to a collection of services I provided rather than seeing me as a partner in our life together. I was his cook, his hostess, his decorator, his social coordinator, but I wasn't his wife anymore, not in any meaningful way. I tried to talk to him about it several times, but he'd always deflect or minimize my concerns. "You're being too sensitive," he'd say. "I'm working hard for us, for our future. I need you to be supportive right now, not demanding." Or he'd turn it around on me. "Maybe if you had your own career, you'd understand the pressure I'm under. You have the luxury of worrying about our relationship because you don't have real responsibilities." Those words cut deep because they revealed how little he understood about the choices I'd made. I'd given up my career ambitions to support his, but somehow that had become evidence of my inadequacy rather than my sacrifice. The final straw came 6 months ago, though I didn't recognize it at the time. James had forgotten our anniversary. Not just forgotten to plan something special, he'd completely forgotten that it was our anniversary at all. I'd spent the day preparing his favorite meal and getting dressed up, thinking we'd at least have a quiet evening together. When he came home at almost 10 o'clock, he found me waiting in the dining room with candles lit and wine poured. "What's all this?" he asked, looking genuinely confused. "It's our anniversary," I said, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. He slapped his forehead in an exaggerated gesture of forgetfulness. "Oh, Sarah, I'm so sorry. This Morrison deal has me completely scattered. Rain check." But he didn't reschedule. He didn't try to make it up to me. He just expected me to understand and forgive like I always did. That night, I realized that I'd become invisible in my own marriage. James saw me as a convenience, not a person. He took my love and support for granted while giving the best of himself to someone else. I just hadn't realized yet that the someone else was Nicole. The truth came out in pieces over the following weeks. A credit card statement showing expensive dinners at restaurants we'd never been to together. A receipt for jewelry I'd never seen. A hotel charge from a weekend when James claimed to be at a real estate conference. When I finally confronted him with the evidence, he didn't even try to deny it. "It just happened," he said, as if falling into bed with his business partner was as unavoidable as getting caught in the rain. "Nicole and I have been spending so much time together and we have this connection." He made it sound like I should understand, like I should be happy for him that he'd found someone who appreciated him properly. Like our marriage was just an inconvenience that had been preventing him from finding true happiness. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, but his tone suggested he was annoyed that I was making his life complicated by caring about our marriage. "Are you going to end it?" I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know if I can," he finally said. "Sarah, what Nicole and I have, it's different. It's about more than just attraction. She gets my ambitions, my drive. She makes me feel like I can conquer the world." What he didn't say, but what I heard clearly, was that I made him feel ordinary. I made him feel comfortable and safe, but Nicole made him feel extraordinary. "What does that mean for us?" I asked. "I don't know," he said again. "I need time to figure things out." But I could see in his eyes that he'd already figured it out. He'd already chosen Nicole. He was just trying to find a way to end our marriage without looking like the villain in the story. That was when I stopped trying to save us. I started preparing for the war I knew was coming. The morning after James's half-hearted confession about his affair, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. While he slept peacefully beside me, apparently relieved to have his secret partially out in the open, I was already planning my next moves. I slipped out of bed and went to my home office, the small room James had dismissed as my hobby space, where I kept my computer and handled what he called my little projects. If he only knew that this room was the command center of an empire he couldn't even imagine. I opened my laptop and reviewed the numbers again. My consulting firm, Mitchell & Associates, now had 12 employees across 3 states. We just signed a contract with a luxury resort developer that would net us over $2 million in the next year. My personal investment portfolio, built from the profits of my business, was worth another $3 million. But numbers were just the beginning. I'd also been building something more valuable than money, a network of connections that spanned from New York to California. Real estate moguls, entertainment industry executives, tech billionaires, and old money families who trusted me with their most expensive purchases. While James had been playing small-town real estate agent, I'd been operating in a world where a single commission could exceed his annual income. And I'd done it all under his nose, using the cover of being his simple, devoted wife. The irony was perfect. James thought he was the real estate expert in our family, but I'd been quietly revolutionizing how luxury properties were marketed and sold. He prided himself on understanding wealthy clients, but I'd been managing portfolios for people whose net worth exceeded the GDP of small countries. My phone buzzed with a text from Linda Rodriguez, my business partner. The Peterson estate listing is official. They want us to handle the entire campaign. Commission potential, $800,000. I smiled as I typed back, set up the meeting. I'll be there this afternoon. James stirred in the bedroom and I quickly closed my laptop. By the time he wandered into the kitchen, I was already dressed and making coffee, playing the role of the devoted wife he expected to see. "You're up early," he said, not really looking at me as he grabbed his phone to check messages. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. "I kept thinking about what you said last night." He glanced up and I saw a flicker of something that might have been guilt. "Sarah, I know this is hard, but I've been thinking that maybe we should see a counselor," I said, keeping my voice soft and hopeful. "Maybe we can work through this together." James's face went through a series of expressions, surprise, discomfort, and then something that looked almost like pity. "Sarah, I don't think counseling is going to fix this. What Nicole and I have, it's not just about the affair. It's about compatibility, about shared goals and dreams." "But we have shared goals," I protested, letting my voice break slightly. "We built this life together." "You built this life for me," he corrected. "And I'm grateful for that, I really am. But I need someone who can build alongside me, not just support from the sidelines." I bit my tongue to keep from laughing. If only he knew that I'd been building an empire that dwarfed his achievements while he thought I was arranging flowers and planning dinner parties. "I see," I said quietly. "So what happens now?" "I think we should start talking about how to handle this practically," he said, his tone becoming businesslike. "I don't want this to be ugly, Sarah. You've been a good wife and I want to make sure you're taken care of." "What does that mean?" "It means I'll be fair in the settlement. The house, half the savings, maybe some alimony for a while until you get back on your feet. I know this is scary for you not having your own career, but you're smart and beautiful. You'll figure something out." I nodded, letting him see the fear he expected. "I don't know anything about divorce lawyers or legal procedures. Don't worry about that. I'll handle everything. I'll find you a good lawyer, someone who'll make sure you get a fair deal without making this more complicated than it needs to be." Translation: he'd find me a lawyer who would encourage me to accept whatever he offered without fighting for more. "That's very thoughtful of you," I said. "I appreciate you taking care of me even now." James relaxed visibly. This was going exactly as he'd hoped. I was being reasonable, grateful, and completely dependent on his guidance. He could end our marriage and still feel like the good guy. "I want us to be friends when this is over," he said. "I want you to be happy, Sarah. You deserve to find someone who can give you what you need." What I needed was for him to keep underestimating me for just a little while longer. After he left for work, I called Linda. "I need to accelerate our timeline," I said. "How quickly can we finalize the Patterson expansion? The Seattle office? We could have it operational in 6 weeks if we push. Why the rush? Let's just say I'm about to have more time to focus on business." Linda laughed. Finally decided to stop playing house and build your empire? Something like that. I spent the rest of the morning making calls that would have shocked James if he'd overheard them. I spoke with investment bankers about a potential acquisition, reviewed architectural plans for a luxury development in Miami, and approved a marketing campaign for a $50 million estate in the Hamptons. By lunch, I'd made more money than James would see in 6 months, and I'd done it all from the home office he thought was just a place for me to pay household bills. That afternoon, I met with my real lawyer. Not the bargain attorney James would inevitably find for me, but Catherine Mills, one of the most ruthless divorce attorneys in the state. She specialized in high-net-worth divorces and had a reputation for destroying unprepared opponents. So he has no idea about your business? Catherine asked, reviewing the financial documents I'd brought. None at all. He thinks I'm a housewife with no income and no assets. And you want to keep it that way until the hearing? Exactly. I want him to be completely blindsided. Catherine smiled. I like your style. This is going to be fun. We spent 2 hours going over strategy. In Washington state, we had community property laws, which meant that assets acquired during marriage were typically split 50-50. But there were exceptions for separate property, inherited assets, and businesses built independently. The key will be proving that you built this company entirely separate from the marriage, Catherine explained. No shared resources, no assistance from your husband, no commingling of funds. I can prove all of that, I said. I have documentation going back to the beginning. Good. And his assets. Mostly the real estate firm, the house, and some investments. Maybe $2 million total. So he's going to walk away with half of $2 million, while you keep your $8 million business plus half of his assets? That's the plan. He's going to be devastated. He's going to be exactly as devastated as he intended me to be. Over the next few weeks, I played my part perfectly. I let James think he was managing every aspect of our divorce. I attended meetings with the mediocre lawyer he'd found for me, a tired-looking man who clearly expected me to accept whatever terms were offered. I nodded and looked overwhelmed when they explained the financial aspects of our settlement. Your husband is being very generous, my fake lawyer said. He's offering you the house and $300,000. That's quite fair, considering you don't have any income. It sounds like a lot of money, I said, letting my voice shake slightly. I just want this to be over. Meanwhile, I was finalizing the biggest deal of my career. The Peterson estate was a $100 million property in Napa Valley, and I'd just convinced the owners to let me handle not just the marketing but the entire sales process. My commission would be over $4 million. James came home that evening in a better mood than I'd seen in months. How did your meeting with the lawyer go? He asked. Good, I think. He explained the settlement offer. It seems fair. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this, James said. I was worried you might try to make things difficult. I just want us both to be happy, I said. If this is what you need, then I support you. He actually looked touched. You're being amazing about this, Sarah. I hope you know how much I appreciate it. I love you, I said, and for the first time in months I meant it. Not the romantic love I'd once felt, but the love you have for someone who's about to teach you the most important lesson of your life. I love you too, he said. Just not in the way we both deserve. If only he knew that I'd never deserved him less. The weeks following James's settlement offer were like performing in a play where I was the only one who knew the real script. Every morning, I woke up and put on the costume of the devastated wife, playing my role so perfectly that sometimes I almost believed it myself. You seem to be handling this better than I expected, James said one evening over dinner. We'd fallen into a strange routine of domestic normalcy, like roommates who happened to be ending a marriage. I'm trying to be mature about it, I replied, pushing food around my plate. Fighting won't change anything. I'm proud of you for that, he said. Some women would be making this much harder. Some women didn't have $8 million in assets their husbands knew nothing about. Some women weren't about to close a deal that would earn them more in commissions than their husband made in 5 years. I just want to understand, I said, letting my voice carry the right amount of hurt confusion. Was I really that bad at being a wife? James's face softened. Sarah, you weren't bad at anything. You were exactly what I needed when we got married. You made me feel stable and supported. But now I need something different. What do you need? A partner who challenges me, who pushes me to be better. Someone who has her own ambitions and can match my drive. I nodded sadly, as if I couldn't possibly understand what he meant. Meanwhile, I was mentally reviewing the agenda for tomorrow's board meeting, where we'd be discussing our expansion into the luxury vacation rental market. Nicole understands my vision, James continued. She sees the potential in deals that other people miss. She makes me want to think bigger. She sounds perfect for you, I said. She is. Sarah, I know this hurts, but I think someday you'll understand that this is better for both of us. You'll find someone who appreciates the kind of wife you are. The kind of wife I was. If only he knew that the woman sitting across from him had revolutionized luxury real estate marketing, held patents on property analysis software, and had a client list that read like a Forbes billionaire ranking. During the day, while James was at work building his affair with Nicole, I was building my empire. I'd fly to Seattle in the morning to close a deal, then be home in time to have dinner ready when he walked through the door. I'd spend afternoons in board meetings with real estate moguls, then come home and ask James about his day like his small-time commercial deals were the most important thing in the world. The hardest part was hiding my excitement about work. When the Peterson estate deal closed and I earned a $4 million commission, I had to celebrate silently in my car before going home to play the worried wife who was concerned about our grocery budget. I'm thinking about getting a part-time job, I told James one evening. Maybe something in retail or reception work. I need to start preparing for life after the divorce. He looked up from his phone with something that might have been guilt. Sarah, you don't need to rush into anything. The settlement will give you time to figure things out. I know, but I want to feel useful. I've been dependent on you for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to take care of myself. You'll figure it out, he said absently, already turning back to his phone. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. If only he knew how smart I really was. The next morning, I had a video conference with investors from Hong Kong about a luxury resort development. The deal was worth $50 million, and they wanted me to handle the entire marketing strategy. I took the call from my home office, speaking fluent Mandarin that I'd learned during my yoga classes over the past year. Mrs. Mitchell, the lead investor said, your reputation precedes you. We're very excited to work with someone of your caliber. The pleasure is mine, I replied. I think you'll find that my approach to luxury property marketing is quite different from what you've experienced before. After the call, I sat in my office reviewing the contracts that would make me another $3 million in the next 6 months. Then I went downstairs and started planning James's favorite meal, because that's what good wives do. That evening, Nicole called during dinner. James's face lit up when he saw her name on his phone. I should take this, he said, stepping out of the room. I could hear him talking in the hallway, his voice taking on the warm, intimate tone he used to use with me. Hey beautiful. How was your day? I continued eating, pretending not to listen as he made plans to meet her for drinks. I'll tell Sarah I have to work late, he said. She never questions it anymore. When he returned to the table, he was already putting on his jacket. Emergency at the office, he said. The Morrison deal hit a snag and Nicole and I need to figure out how to save it. Of course, I said. I'll keep dinner warm in case you're not too late. Don't wait up, he said, kissing my forehead like I was his sister. This might take a while. After he left, I went back to my office and spent the evening reviewing investment portfolios. I'd started buying luxury properties in emerging markets, using my industry knowledge to identify opportunities that other investors were missing. My real estate investment portfolio was now worth over $5 million, and it was growing every month. The beautiful irony was that I was becoming everything James claimed to want in a partner. I was ambitious, driven, and successful. I was building an empire that dwarfed his achievements. I was the challenging, dynamic woman he said he needed. But he was so blinded by his assumptions about me that he couldn't see what was right in front of him. He saw what he expected to see, a dependent housewife who needed his protection and guidance. 2 weeks later, James came home with news that didn't surprise me at all. I'm going to San Francisco next week, he announced. There's a commercial property there that might be perfect for our expansion plans. That sounds exciting, I said. How long will you be gone? Just a few days. Nicole is coming with me, she has contacts there that could be helpful. Of course she is. Sarah, I know this is awkward, but... It's fine, I interrupted. I understand that you have to work together. You're being incredibly mature about this, he said. I know this situation isn't easy. The situation wasn't easy, but not for the reasons he thought. The hard part was pretending to be hurt instead of relieved. The hard part was acting like I cared about his relationship with Nicole when I was actually grateful she was keeping him distracted from my business activities. While James was in San Francisco with Nicole, I flew to Dubai to finalize a partnership with a luxury hotel chain. The deal would open up an entire new market for my consulting firm, and the potential revenue was staggering. You're exactly what we need, the hotel executive told me over dinner overlooking the Persian Gulf. Someone who understands both the American luxury market and international investment patterns. I'm excited to work with you, I said. I think we're going to accomplish something remarkable together. I was back home 12 hours before James returned from his trip, with jet lag hidden under carefully applied makeup and a story about spending the week reorganizing closets and catching up on household projects. How was San Francisco? I asked when he walked in the door. Productive, he said, but he seemed distracted. The property deal fell through, but Nicole and I got to spend some time talking about the future. What kind of future? Our future. After the divorce is final, we're thinking about merging our businesses officially. Creating a partnership that's both professional and personal. That sounds wonderful, I said, and I meant it. The more time he spent planning his life with Nicole, the less attention he paid to what I was doing. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm going to take care of you, he said. Even after we're not married anymore, I want to make sure you're okay. I know you will, I said. You're a good man, James. I'm sorry I wasn't the right woman for you. You're a good woman too, he said. You're just not the right woman for me. As I watched him unpack his suitcase, I thought about how right he was. I wasn't the right woman for him because I was too much woman for him. I was too ambitious, too successful, too independent. I was everything he claimed to want but couldn't handle in reality. James needed someone who would make him feel superior, who would stroke his ego and make him feel like the successful one in the relationship. Nicole probably did that perfectly, building him up while allowing him to believe he was the driving force behind their partnership. But I was done making men feel bigger by making myself smaller. I was done hiding my light under a bushel basket. I was done playing the supporting role in someone else's story. In less than a month, James would discover exactly who he'd been living with all these years. He'd learned that the woman he'd dismissed as a decorative accessory was actually more successful than he'd ever dreamed of being. The woman he thought needed his protection was about to protect herself in a way that would change both of their lives forever. 3 weeks before our divorce hearing, I closed the biggest deal of my career. The Dubai hotel partnership was official, and my consulting firm had just secured exclusive rights to market luxury properties across the Middle East. The signing bonus alone was worth more than James's entire net worth. I celebrated with a glass of champagne in my home office, then went downstairs to ask James how his day had gone. Frustrating, he said, loosening his tie. I lost the Patterson building to another firm. They outbid us by $50,000. I'm sorry, I said, rubbing his shoulders. Maybe the next one will work out better. Maybe. Sometimes I wonder if I'm thinking too small, you know? Nicole keeps pushing me to go after bigger deals, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that level of risk. I almost laughed. While he was worried about $50,000 deals, I just signed a contract that would generate over $20 million in the next 2 years. But I kept my expression sympathetic and supportive. You're being smart, I said. Taking calculated risks is different from being reckless. Nicole doesn't see it that way. She thinks I'm being too conservative. What do you think? I think she's probably right. She has this vision of building something really big, something that could compete with the major commercial real estate firms. But that requires capital we don't have. Have you thought about investors? Nicole has some contacts who might be interested, but I'm not sure I want to give up control of my company. I wanted to tell him that I could solve his capital problems with a single phone call, that I had connections who would consider his entire business a rounding error on their investment portfolios. But that would ruin everything. I'm sure you'll figure it out, I said instead. You always do. The next morning, I flew to New York for a meeting with one of the most powerful real estate investment firms in the country. They wanted to discuss a potential acquisition of my company, an offer that would make me worth over $50 million overnight. Your growth trajectory is remarkable, the senior partner said as we reviewed my financial statements. We've never seen a consulting firm scale this quickly in the luxury market. I've been fortunate to identify some underserved niches, I said. The ultra-wealthy have very specific needs when it comes to real estate, and most firms don't understand the psychology involved. Your client retention rate is extraordinary. How do you maintain such loyalty? I deliver results that exceed expectations. When someone trusts me with a $50 million property purchase, I make sure they feel that every dollar was well spent. The meeting lasted 4 hours, and by the end, I had a preliminary offer on the table. They wanted to buy my company for $45 million, with the option for me to stay on as CEO and grow the business under their umbrella. We're not just buying your company, the partner explained. We're buying your expertise, your network, and your vision. You've created something unique in this market. I asked for 2 weeks to consider the offer, though I'd already made my decision. I wasn't ready to sell yet. I was having too much fun building my empire, and I wanted to see how big I could make it on my own. That evening, I had dinner with Linda Rodriguez, my business partner and the woman who'd helped me build everything I'd accomplished. "You're really not going to take the offer?" she asked over sushi in Manhattan. "Not yet. I want to see what happens after the divorce is final. I might have some new opportunities to explore. Speaking of which, how is your husband handling the separation?" "He's completely clueless. He thinks I'm going to struggle financially after the divorce." Linda laughed. "He's in for quite a shock. That's the idea. Do you think he'll try to claim part of your business?" "He can try, but he'll lose. I've been very careful to keep everything separate. He never contributed to the business, never even knew it existed. Catherine says we have an airtight case. Catherine Mills is the best. If she says you're protected, you're protected." I flew back to Seattle the next day and arrived home to find James pacing in the living room, looking more agitated than I'd seen him in months. "Where were you?" he asked. "I called your cell phone, but it went straight to voicemail." "I was in Portland," I said, using the cover story I'd prepared. "My college roommate is getting divorced, and she needed some emotional support. You could have told me you were leaving town. I didn't think it mattered. We're separated, remember? We're still married until the papers are signed. I worry about you." I almost asked him why he worried about me when he was planning to leave me with nothing but a house and a modest settlement, but I caught myself. I needed to stay in character for just a little longer. "I'm sorry," I said. "I should have left a note." "It's fine. I had some news I wanted to share with you." "What kind of news?" "Nicole and I are officially engaged." I stared at him for a moment, processing the information. "Congratulations," I said finally. "When did this happen?" "Last night. I wanted to tell you before anyone else found out." "That's thoughtful of you." "Sarah, I know this is difficult, but—" "It's not difficult," I interrupted. "I want you to be happy, James. If Nicole makes you happy, then I'm genuinely glad for you." He looked surprised by my reaction. "You're not upset?" "I'm sad that our marriage didn't work out, but I'm not upset that you found someone who's right for you. You're being incredibly gracious about this." "We had good years together," I said. "I don't want to end things with anger and resentment." "Nicole was worried about how you'd react. She knows this situation is awkward for everyone." "Nicole doesn't need to worry about me. I'm tougher than I look." If only he knew how tough I really was. The next week, I received a call that changed everything. The Peterson estate, the $100 million property in Napa Valley, had attracted interest from a tech billionaire who wanted to buy it as a private retreat. But he didn't just want to buy the property, he wanted to buy an entire portfolio of luxury estates across the country. "He's looking to spend over $300 million, the seller's agent told me. "He wants someone who can identify and acquire premium properties in major markets." Your name came up immediately. "What's the timeline?" "He wants to close on the first 5 properties within 6 months. Are you interested?" I was more than interested. This was the kind of opportunity that could transform my business from successful to legendary. The commission alone would be worth over $15 million. "Set up a meeting," I said. "I'll clear my schedule." That evening, I found James in our home office, working on his laptop. He looked up when I entered and I could see the stressed lines around his eyes. "How was your day?" I asked. "Complicated. The Morrison deal fell through, and I'm starting to worry about cash flow." "I'm sorry to hear that. Nicole thinks we should take bigger risks, but I'm not sure we can afford to. If we bet big and lose, the whole company could go under." "What does your gut tell you?" "My gut tells me I'm out of my league. I've been doing this for 10 years, but I feel like I'm still playing in the minor leagues while everyone else is in the majors." I sat down across from him, looking at the man I'd once loved and feeling something that might have been pity. He was so close to the success he dreamed of, but he was too afraid to reach for it. Meanwhile, I was operating in a world he couldn't even imagine. "You'll figure it out," I said gently. "You always do." "I hope so. Sarah, I want you to know that even though our marriage didn't work out, I respect you. You've been patient with me through all of this, and I appreciate that." "I respect you too, James. You're a good man. I want us to be friends after this is over. I want to be able to look back on our marriage as something that mattered, even if it didn't last." "I'd like that too," I said, though I wondered if friendship would be possible after he learned the truth about who I really was. 2 days later, I had my meeting with the tech billionaire. His name was David Chin, and he'd made his fortune in artificial intelligence before branching out into real estate investment. He was exactly the kind of client I'd built my business around, ultra-wealthy, sophisticated, and looking for someone who could understand his vision. "I want to create a network of luxury retreats," he explained over lunch at the Four Seasons. "Places where I can host business meetings, entertain clients, and have privacy when I need to think. But I don't want to deal with the hassle of finding and acquiring these properties myself." "What's your ideal timeline?" "I want to own 5 properties within 6 months, with the option to acquire more if the first phase goes well. Budget is not a constraint. I'm more interested in finding the right properties than getting the best price." "What markets are you considering?" "Napa Valley, the Hamptons, Aspen, Miami, and maybe something in the Pacific Northwest. Each property should be unique, but they all need to meet the same standards for privacy, luxury, and entertainment capability." I spent the next 2 hours outlining my approach to high-end property acquisition, discussing everything from market analysis to privacy concerns to resale value. By the end of lunch, David Shin was convinced that I was the right person for the job. "When can you start?" he asked. "Immediately," I said. "I'll have property recommendations for you within 2 weeks." "Excellent. My assistant will send you the contract details." "I'm looking forward to working with you, Sarah." As I walked out of the restaurant, I realized that I'd just committed to the biggest project of my career. The commission from this deal alone would make me worth over $30 million. I was about to become one of the most successful real estate consultants in the country. And James still thought I was a housewife who needed his protection. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier while James was at work. I signed for the envelope with shaking hands, playing the part of the nervous wife even though there was no one there to see my performance. Inside were all the documents I'd been expecting: the settlement agreement, the property division, and the financial disclosures. According to the papers, James's total assets were worth approximately $1.8 million, including his business, our house, and his investment accounts. What the papers didn't include was any mention of my business, my investments, or my actual net worth. As far as James's lawyer was concerned, I was exactly what I appeared to be: a housewife with no significant assets or income. I called Catherine Mills immediately. "They filed everything exactly as we expected," I told her. "No mention of my business, no attempt to investigate my finances." "Perfect. His lawyer is either incompetent or lazy. Probably both." "What's our next move?" "We file our response tomorrow. That's when we'll reveal your actual financial situation and request a proper division of assets." "How do you think he'll react?" "He's going to be devastated. Men like your husband build their entire self-worth around being the provider, the successful one. When he realizes you've been more successful than him this whole time, it's going to destroy his ego." "Good," I said, and I meant it. That evening, James came home early, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in weeks. "The papers came today," I said, holding up the envelope. "I know. My lawyer called to confirm they'd been delivered. Have you had a chance to look them over?" "Yes. Everything looks like we discussed." "Good. I know this is hard, Sarah, but I think you'll find that the settlement is fair. The house is worth about $600,000, and the cash settlement will give you another $300,000. That should be enough to get you started on your new life." $900,000. He thought $900,000 was generous compensation for 5 years of marriage and the end of the life we built together. "It's very generous," I said. "I appreciate you taking care of me." "I want you to be okay," he said. "I know you're scared about the future, but you're going to be fine. You're smart and capable, and once you get back into the workforce, you'll probably surprise yourself." "I hope so. Have you given any thought to what kind of work you might want to do?" "I was thinking maybe something in real estate. All those years of listening to you talk about the business, I think I picked up more than I realized." James smiled indulgently. "That's not a bad idea. You have good people skills and you understand the luxury market from a client perspective. You might do well in residential sales." "Do you think so?" "I do. Obviously, you'd have to get your license and start at the bottom, but everyone has to start somewhere." "Start at the bottom." I was already at the top of the luxury real estate consulting world, but he saw me as someone who would need to start somewhere, selling starter homes to first-time buyers. "Maybe you could give me some advice," I said. "You know, help me understand the business side of things." "Of course. I'd be happy to mentor you. That's what friends do, right?" "Right." The next morning, Catherine filed our response to the divorce petition. Unlike James's simple documents, our filing was comprehensive and detailed. It included complete financial disclosures of my business, my investments, and my actual net worth. According to our calculations, I was worth approximately $15 million, while James was worth $1.8 million. Under Washington state's community property laws, we would each be entitled to half of the marital assets. But my business and investments were separate property, built entirely without his knowledge or participation. "This is going to be interesting," Catherine said when she called to confirm the filing. "His lawyer is going to get quite a surprise when he sees these documents." "How long before James finds out?" "His lawyer has 5 days to respond once he receives our filing. I guess you'll hear from James within a week." "I can't wait." That afternoon, I flew to Aspen to view a property for David Chin. The estate was a $40 million ski lodge with 12 bedrooms, a private ski lift, and views that belonged in a magazine. It was exactly the kind of property that would appeal to someone who wanted to entertain clients in style. "This is perfect," I told the seller's agent. "My client is going to love it." "When would he want to close?" "As soon as possible. He's prepared to pay cash and waive the inspection contingency." That's music to my ears. I spent the evening at the lodge taking photos and notes for my presentation to David. The commission on this property alone would be worth over $1 million. By the time I finished working with him, I'd earned more money than James had made in his entire career. When I returned to Seattle the next day, I found James waiting for me in the living room. His face was pale and he was holding a stack of papers in his hands. "We need to talk," he said. "Of course. Let me just put my bag away." "Sarah, where were you yesterday?" "I told you I was visiting my friend in Portland." "Why?" "Because my lawyer called this morning. He received your financial disclosure documents." I felt my heart start to race, but I kept my expression neutral. "What financial disclosure documents?" "The ones that show you're worth $15 million. I stared at him for a moment, letting the silence stretch between us. "I don't understand." "Don't lie to me, Sarah. According to these documents, you own a consulting company worth $8 million. You have investment accounts worth another $5 million. You have property holdings I never knew existed." "James, I think there's been some kind of mistake." "There's no mistake," he shouted, jumping to his feet. "These documents are signed by you. They include bank statements, tax returns, business contracts. How long have you been lying to me?" I sat down slowly, abandoning the pretense of ignorance. "I haven't been lying to you, James. I just haven't been telling you everything." "Haven't been telling me everything?" "Sarah, you've been living a completely different life. You own a business that's worth more than everything I've ever built combined." "Yes, I do." "How is that possible? How did you build a $15 million business without me knowing about it?" "The same way you built a relationship with Nicole without me knowing about it." "People can keep secrets, James. Even from the people they're married to." He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. "Who are you?" "I'm the woman you married." "I'm just not the woman you thought you married." "But you're a housewife. You don't work. You spend your days shopping and having lunch with friends." "No, James. I spend my days running a business that generates millions of dollars in revenue. I spend my days working with clients who buy $50 million properties. I spend my days being everything you said you wanted in a partner." "This doesn't make sense. When did you start this business?" 2 years ago. Right around the time you started your affair with Nicole." "You've been lying to me for 2 years?" "I've been protecting myself for 2 years. And it's a good thing I did, considering what you were planning to do to me." James sat down heavily, his face going through a range of emotions: shock, confusion, anger, and something that might have been fear. "Sarah, I had no idea. If I'd known you were successful, things might have been different." "No, they wouldn't have been. You didn't fall out of love with me because I wasn't successful enough. You fell out of love with me because you wanted to feel important, and being married to someone you considered inferior made you feel superior." "That's not true." "Isn't it? You've spent months telling me how much you need a partner who can match your ambition. Well, congratulations, James. You've been married to someone who surpassed your ambition years ago." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you couldn't handle it. I knew that if you discovered I was more successful than you, you'd either try to control my business or you'd resent me for it. Either way, our marriage would have ended. So you just let me make a fool of myself?" "I let you make your own choices. You chose to have an affair. You chose to end our marriage. You chose to try to leave me with nothing while you rode off into the sunset with your girlfriend." James was quiet for a long moment, staring at the papers in his hands. "What happens now?" "Now we get divorced. But the settlement is going to be very different from what you expected." "How different?" You'll get half of the marital assets just like we agreed. But since my business is separate property, you don't get any of that. And since I'm worth more than you are, you won't be paying me alimony. Wait, what? James, you're about to discover that divorce works both ways. You'll walk away with about $900,000, half of your business and half of our other assets. I'll walk away with my $15 million plus half of your assets. That's not fair. It's exactly as fair as what you were planning to do to me. The only difference is that I actually earned my money. James stood up and started pacing the room. This changes everything. Sarah, maybe we should reconsider the divorce. Maybe we can work things out. No, we can't. But if we're both successful, we could be a power couple. We could build something amazing together. We could have built something amazing together 5 years ago. But you chose to build it with someone else instead. I made a mistake. I can end things with Nicole. James, you're engaged to Nicole. You love Nicole. The only thing that's changed is that you've discovered I'm not the helpless victim you thought I was. I do love Nicole, but now you're seeing dollar signs instead of love. That's not a foundation for a marriage, James. That's just greed. He sat back down, looking defeated. I don't understand how this happened. How did I not know who you really were? Because you never bothered to find out. You were so busy building your own life that you never paid attention to mine. I thought I knew you. You knew the version of me that I showed you. The version that made you feel comfortable and secure. But that was never all of who I was. What do I tell Nicole? Tell her the truth. Tell her that your ex-wife is worth more money than both of you combined, and that you're not going to be as wealthy after the divorce as you thought you'd be. James laughed bitterly. She's going to be thrilled about that. That's not my problem anymore, James. That's yours. The week after James discovered the truth about my financial situation was the longest week of our marriage. He moved through the house like a ghost, staring at me with a mixture of confusion and something that might have been awe. The man who had spent months planning to discard me was now seeing me as if I were a stranger. I keep thinking about all the times you sat there while I explained real estate concepts to you, he said one morning over coffee. You must have thought I was such an idiot. I never thought you were an idiot, James. I thought you were a man who needed to feel important. But you were building this empire while I was lecturing you about market trends. You were working with clients I've never even dreamed of meeting. Yes, I was. Why didn't you ever correct me? Why didn't you ever tell me I was wrong about something? Because it wasn't about being right or wrong. It was about letting you be the person you needed to be in our marriage. He was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee absently. I called off the engagement. I looked up in surprise. What? Nicole and I ended it yesterday. James, you didn't have to do that because of the money. It wasn't because of the money. Well, not entirely. It was because of what happened when I told her about the money. What happened? I explained that the divorce settlement wasn't going to be what we expected. That you had assets I didn't know about, and that I'd be getting less than half of what I thought. How did she react? She asked how much less. When I told her, she got very quiet. Then she said maybe we should postpone the wedding until after the divorce was final, so we could see what our financial situation would really be. That seems practical. Sarah, she didn't say it like someone who was being practical. She said it like someone who was reconsidering whether she wanted to marry me at all. I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy for him. I'm sorry. Are you? Really? I'm sorry that you're discovering the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves what you can give them. I'm not sorry that you're learning that lesson now instead of after you married her. James laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is? I accused you of being materialistic. I told Nicole that you were shallow, that you only cared about being comfortable and secure. But you were earning more money than I ever dreamed of, and you never said a word about it. Money was never what mattered to me in our marriage, James. I just wanted to feel valued and appreciated. But I didn't value you. I treated you like an accessory. Yes, you did. And now Nicole is treating me the same way I treated you. Yes, she is. How do you stand it? How do you stand being married to someone who sees you as a means to an end instead of a person? I don't stand it. That's why I'm divorcing you. He nodded slowly. I deserve that. You deserve to be happy, James. You just don't deserve to be happy at my expense. What if I said I was sorry? What if I said I wanted to try again? Then I'd say you were 2 years too late. But we could be incredible together. You with your business, me with mine. We could build something really special. We could have built something special with what we had. But you chose to build it with someone else instead. I made a mistake. You made a choice. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. That evening, Nicole called. James looked at his phone for a long moment before answering. Hello, Nicole. I could hear her voice through the phone, though I couldn't make out the words. She sounded upset. No, I haven't changed my mind, James said. I think we both need some time to figure out what we really want. More talking from Nicole. I understand that you're disappointed. I'm disappointed too. But I can't marry someone who's only interested in me when they think I'm wealthy. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, with James repeatedly saying no to whatever Nicole was suggesting. When he finally hung up, he looked exhausted. She wants to get back together, he said. What did you tell her? I told her I need time to think. But honestly, Sarah, I don't think there's anything to think about. You were right about her. She's not interested in building a life with me. She's interested in building a life with my money. I'm sorry you're going through this. Are you? Or are you happy that I'm getting what I deserve? I'm not happy that you're in pain, James. I'm happy that you're finally seeing the truth about the people in your life. Including you? Including me. For the first time in our marriage, you're seeing me as I really am instead of as what you wanted me to be. And what are you really? I'm a successful businesswoman who built an empire while her husband was having an affair. I'm someone who's strong enough to walk away from a marriage that wasn't working, even when it would have been easier to stay and pretend everything was fine. You're incredible. I'm ordinary. I'm just someone who refused to let other people define my worth. I defined your worth for 5 years. You tried to. But I never let you succeed completely. Is there any chance you could forgive me? I already have forgiven you, James. That's why I'm able to sit here and have this conversation with you. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'm willing to repeat the same mistakes. What if I promised things would be different? You can't promise that. You can't promise that you wouldn't resent me for being more successful than you are. You can't promise that you wouldn't try to control my business or make me feel guilty for my achievements. I could learn to handle it. James, 3 days ago you were planning to leave me with $900,000 while you walked away with a multimillionaire girlfriend. You thought I was pathetic and dependent. Now that you know I'm worth $15 million, suddenly you want to work things out. What does that tell you about your feelings for me? He was quiet for a long moment. It tells me that I'm exactly as shallow as you think I am. You're not shallow, James. You're human. But you're also not ready to be married to someone like me. Someone like you? Someone who doesn't need you. Someone who's built a life that doesn't revolve around making you feel important. Maybe I could learn to need you instead of the other way around. That's not how healthy relationships work. We should want each other, not need each other. Did you ever want me? Really want me? I wanted the man I thought you were. I wanted the partner I thought we could be together. But that man and that partnership only existed in my imagination. Sarah, I know I don't deserve it, but could you teach me? Could you show me how to be the kind of man who could be worthy of someone like you? James, I'm not a rehabilitation project. I'm not going to teach you how to love me properly. That's something you either know how to do or you don't. But I do love you. You love the idea of being married to a successful woman. You love the idea of telling people that your wife is worth $15 million. But you don't love me. How can you be so sure? Because if you loved me, you would have seen me for who I really was years ago. If you loved me, you wouldn't have needed me to be helpless in order to feel strong. If you loved me, you never would have looked for those things in someone else. James stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the garden I'd maintained for 5 years. I really screwed this up, didn't I? You made choices that seemed right to you at the time. Now you're dealing with the consequences of those choices. Nicole called me an idiot for not realizing what I had. Nicole's angry because she thought she was getting a wealthy husband, and now she's discovering that you're not as wealthy as she expected. She said I was the stupidest man she'd ever met. She said any man who couldn't see that his wife was building an empire right under his nose deserved to lose her. She's not wrong. Are you enjoying this? Watching me realize how badly I misjudged everything. I'm not enjoying your pain, James, but I am enjoying my freedom. Freedom from me? Freedom from pretending to be less than I am. Freedom from hiding my achievements so you could feel successful. Freedom from playing a role that was suffocating me. I made you feel like you had to hide who you were? You made me feel like being myself would threaten our marriage. And you know what? I was right. The moment you discovered who I really was, you wanted to change all the decisions you'd made. Because I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You wanted a wife who made you feel superior, not a partner who challenged you to be better. I want to be better now. Then be better for the next woman you fall in love with. Be better for yourself. But don't ask me to give you another chance to hurt me. Sarah, I'm begging you. Please don't throw away 5 years of marriage. I'm not throwing anything away, James. I'm choosing to save myself before it's too late. What if it's already too late for me? What if I never find anyone like you again? Then you'll learn to appreciate what you have while you have it. I can't believe I'm losing you because I was too stupid to see what was right in front of me. You're not losing me because you were stupid, James. You're losing me because you chose someone else. The money doesn't change that. My success doesn't erase your affair. Finding out I'm wealthy doesn't undo the months you spent planning to discard me. But it changes how I see you. Exactly. And that's the problem. Your feelings for me shouldn't change based on my net worth. The fact that they do tells me everything I need to know about what our marriage really meant to you. James turned back to face me and I could see tears in his eyes. I loved you, Sarah. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I did love you. I know you did. In your way, with the understanding you had then, you loved me. But it wasn't enough to build a life on. And now it's too late. Now you have the chance to learn from your mistakes. You have the chance to become the kind of person who could love someone properly. Will you ever forgive me? I already have. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. What does it mean? It means I don't hate you for the choices you made. It means I understand that you did what you thought was best for you at the time. It means I'm not going to spend the rest of my life being angry about something I can't change. But you're still going to divorce me. Yes, I am. Because staying would be settling for less than I deserve, and I'm done settling. That night, James slept in the guest room for the first time since we'd started the divorce process. I lay in our bed alone, listening to the sound of him moving around downstairs, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't pretending to be someone else. I wasn't hiding my achievements or downplaying my success. I wasn't walking on eggshells around James's ego or making myself smaller so he could feel bigger. I was just myself, and it felt incredible. The next morning, James was already gone when I woke up. He'd left a note on the kitchen counter saying he was staying at a hotel until the divorce was final, that he thought some space would be good for both of us. I poured myself coffee and sat in the breakfast nook, looking out at the garden and thinking about the future. In 2 weeks, I'd be officially divorced. In 2 weeks, I'd be free to build whatever life I wanted without having to consider how it would affect someone else's ego. I had a business worth millions of dollars, clients who respected my expertise, and opportunities that most people could only dream of. I had everything I needed to be happy. Everything except the marriage I'd once thought I wanted. But as I sat there in the quiet house, I realized that I didn't want that marriage anymore. I wanted something better. I wanted a partnership with someone who could see me for who I really was and love me not despite my success, but because of it. James had given me a gift, though he didn't realize it. By leaving me, he'd forced me to save myself. By underestimating me, he'd given me the freedom to become everything I was capable of being. The best revenge, I realized, wasn't taking his money or humiliating him in court. The best revenge was building a life so amazing that losing me would be the biggest mistake he ever made. And I was just getting started. The morning of our divorce hearing, I woke up at 5 a.m. and spent an hour choosing my outfit. I wanted to look successful without being flashy, confident without being arrogant. I settled on a navy blue suit from a designer James had never heard of, paired with jewelry that cost more than his car but looked understated to the untrained eye. Catherine Mills met me at the courthouse steps at 8:30. She was wearing her own version of power dressing. A black suit that probably cost $5,000 and an expression that could cut glass. "Ready for this?" she asked. I'd been ready for months. Remember, James doesn't know about the David Chin deal yet. When that comes out in court, it's going to be devastating for his case. How devastating? Let's just say that your net worth has increased significantly since we filed our initial response. Over the past month, I'd closed 3 properties for David Chin, earning over $8 million in commissions. My business was now worth over $20 million, and my personal net worth had jumped to nearly $30 million. James had no idea. We walked into the courthouse together, our heels clicking on the marble floors. I felt calm in a way that surprised me. This wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about justice. It was about finally being seen for who I really was. James was already there with his lawyer, a tired-looking man named Robert Peterson who specialized in what he called amicable divorces. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you expected your soon-to-be ex-wife to be reasonable and cooperative. James looked up when we entered, and I saw his eyes widen as he took in my appearance. I looked like exactly what I was, a successful businesswoman who didn't need anyone's protection or charity. "Sarah," he said, standing up. "You look different." "I look like myself," I replied. Nicole was sitting in the gallery behind James, wearing a dress that was trying too hard to look expensive. She glared at me with undisguised hostility, as if I were somehow responsible for the fact that her engagement had fallen apart. "All rise," the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Martinez presiding. Judge Martinez was a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested she'd seen everything the family court system had to offer. She looked at the papers in front of her with the expression of someone who was used to dealing with bitter divorces and unreasonable people. "This is the matter of Thompson versus Thompson," she said. "I understand we have a divorce proceeding with some contested financial issues." James's lawyer stood up first. "Your Honor, this should be a straightforward case. My client and Mrs. Thompson have been married for 5 years. Mr. Thompson owns a commercial real estate business valued at approximately $1.2 million. The couple owns a home valued at $600,000, and they have joint savings and investment accounts totaling approximately $200,000. "And Mrs. Thompson's assets?" the judge asked. "Mrs. Thompson has been a homemaker throughout the marriage. She has no significant income or assets separate from those acquired during the marriage." Judge Martinez looked at Catherine. "Counselor Mills?" Catherine stood up with the kind of smile that made opposing lawyers nervous. "Your Honor, I'm afraid Mr. Peterson has been working with incomplete information. Mrs. Thompson does indeed have assets separate from the marriage, and they are quite substantial." "How substantial?" "Mrs. Thompson's business and investment portfolio is currently valued at approximately $30 million. The courtroom went completely silent. James's lawyer dropped his pen. James himself turned to stare at me with his mouth open. Even Nicole made a small gasping sound from the gallery. "I'm sorry," Judge Martinez said. "Did you say 30 million? "Yes, Your Honor." "Mrs. Thompson is the owner and CEO of Mitchell & Associates, a luxury real estate consulting firm that operates in multiple states. She also maintains a substantial investment portfolio in high-end properties." James's lawyer was frantically flipping through papers. "Your Honor, this is the first we're hearing of any business. There was no mention of a company in the initial filings." "That's because your client never asked," Catherine replied smoothly. "Mrs. Thompson built this business entirely separate from the marriage, using her maiden name and separate financial accounts. Mr. Thompson was unaware of its existence." "That's impossible," James said, half standing before his lawyer pulled him back down. "She's a housewife. She doesn't work." Judge Martinez looked at me directly for the first time. "Mrs. Thompson, is it true that you own a business worth $30 million? "Yes, Your Honor. I've been building it for the past 3 years." "And your husband was unaware of this business?" "Completely unaware, Your Honor. I maintained separate accounts and used my maiden name for all business activities." "Why did you choose to keep this information from your husband?" I took a deep breath. "Your Honor, my husband made it clear throughout our marriage that he needed to be the successful one, the provider. He often made comments about women who competed with their husbands professionally. I believed that revealing my business success would damage our marriage. And yet you're divorcing anyway." "My husband chose to end our marriage for another woman, Your Honor. He believed I would be financially helpless after the divorce and planned accordingly." Judge Martinez looked at the papers in front of her again. "Mr. Peterson, what is your client seeking in this divorce?" "Your Honor, given this new information, we'd like to request a recess to review." "What were you seeking before you learned about Mrs. Thompson's assets?" James's lawyer looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Thompson was prepared to offer Mrs. Thompson the marital home and a settlement of $300,000. Out of total marital assets worth approximately $2 million? "Yes, Your Honor." "So Mr. Thompson was planning to keep roughly $1.4 million while giving his wife $600,000? "The business represents the majority of Mr. Thompson's net worth, Your Honor. It was built during the marriage." "I see. And Mrs. Thompson's business?" Catherine stood up again. "Was built entirely separate from the marriage, Your Honor. Mrs. Thompson can document that no marital funds were used, no marital assets were leveraged, and Mr. Thompson provided no assistance or support for the business in any way." "Mrs. Thompson," the judge said, "what are you seeking in this divorce?" "I'm seeking half of the marital assets as provided by Washington state law. I believe that amounts to approximately $1 million. "And your business?" "Remains my separate property as it was built independently of the marriage." Judge Martinez looked at James. "Mr. Thompson, did you know your wife was building a business?" James stood up slowly. "No, Your Honor. I had no idea. Did you ever ask about her daily activities? I assumed she was managing our household and socializing with friends. For 3 years, you never questioned how your wife spent her time? She seemed happy with her routine. I didn't think I needed to monitor her activities. But you were monitoring her activities in another way, weren't you, Mr. Thompson? James's lawyer tried to object, but Judge Martinez continued. According to the financial records provided by Mrs. Thompson's counsel, you maintained sole control over all marital accounts. Mrs. Thompson had no independent access to funds, correct? I handled our finances because I'm better with money. Better with money than a woman who built a $30 million business? James had no answer for that. Judge Martinez looked at the papers again. Mrs. Thompson, I'm looking at your recent business transactions. You closed a deal last week for $8 million in commissions. Yes, Your Honor. I'm working with a client who's acquiring luxury properties across multiple markets. And Mr. Thompson, your most recent business transaction? James's lawyer whispered something to him. Approximately $50,000, Your Honor. $50,000, the judge repeated. Mrs. Thompson, in the past month, you've earned more money than your husband makes in several years, is that correct? Yes, Your Honor. Judge Martinez set down her papers and looked at both lawyers. This is one of the most unusual cases I've seen in family court. We have a husband who was planning to leave his wife with minimal assets, believing she was financially helpless, while she was actually building a business empire worth more than he could imagine. She turned to James. Mr. Thompson, do you understand the irony of this situation? I'm beginning to, Your Honor. You were prepared to divorce a woman you believed was dependent on you for financial security. In reality, you were married to one of the most successful businesswomen in the state. Does that give you any insight into why your marriage failed? James was quiet for a long moment. Yes, Your Honor. I think it does. Mrs. Thompson, the judge continued, I'm curious about something. If you're worth $30 million, why are you asking for half of your husband's assets? Wouldn't it be easier to simply walk away? Your Honor, this isn't about the money. It's about the principle. Mr. Thompson planned to take advantage of what he believed was my financial vulnerability. I believe he should experience the consequences of that decision. I see. And Mr. Thompson, now that you understand your wife's true financial situation, do you wish to change your settlement offer? James looked at his lawyer, then back at the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to make a statement. Go ahead. James stood up and looked directly at me. Sarah, I owe you an apology. Not just for the affair, but for completely failing to see who you really are. I treated you like you were less than me when you were actually more successful than I ever dreamed of being. He turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I don't deserve half of anything Sarah has built. She did that without my help, and she did it while I was... He paused. While I was betraying our marriage. What are you saying, Mr. Thompson? I'm saying that Sarah should keep everything she's earned, and I'll accept whatever she thinks is fair from our marital assets. Judge Martinez looked surprised. Are you sure about that, Mr. Thompson? I'm sure, Your Honor. Sarah was right about the principles involved here. I was planning to take advantage of her, and I deserve to face the consequences of that. Mrs. Thompson, what do you think is fair? I stood up slowly, looking at James with something that might have been respect. Your Honor, I think the original community property split is appropriate. Mr. Thompson will receive half of the marital assets, approximately $1 million. That will allow him to maintain his business and start over. That's very generous, given the circumstances. I don't need his money, Your Honor. I just needed him to understand what he was trying to do to me. Judge Martinez nodded. I think this case provides an excellent lesson about assumptions and the importance of truly knowing your spouse. Mrs. Thompson, I'm granting your divorce and awarding you half of the marital assets. Mr. Thompson will retain ownership of his business and half of the remaining marital assets. She banged her gavel. Divorce granted. As we walked out of the courtroom, I felt lighter than I had in years. James caught up with me in the hallway. Sarah, he said, I want you to know that losing you is the biggest mistake I'll ever make. I know, I said. But it was a mistake you needed to make so you could learn from it. Will you ever forgive me? I already have, James. Now you need to forgive yourself and become the kind of man who deserves the next woman who loves him. He nodded, tears in his eyes. Thank you for not destroying me in there. You could have taken everything. I didn't need to take everything, James. I already had everything. I just needed you to see it. As I walked away from the courthouse with Catherine, I realized that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I was sitting in my new office, a corner suite in downtown Seattle with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Sound. Mitchell and Associates had grown to 30 employees across 5 states, and we'd just been featured on the cover of Commercial Real Estate Weekly as the consulting firm revolutionizing luxury property sales. I was reviewing the quarterly reports when my assistant buzzed me. "Sarah, there's a James Thompson here to see you. He says he's your ex-husband." I looked up in surprise. "Send him in." James walked into my office wearing a suit I didn't recognize and an expression I'd never seen before, humility mixed with genuine respect. He looked around at the impressive space, taking in the awards on the walls, the expensive furniture, and the general atmosphere of success. "Wow," he said. "This is incredible. Thank you. What brings you by? I wanted to apologize. Again. And to give you this." He held out an envelope. "What is it?" "A check for the difference between what I tried to give you in the settlement and what half of everything was actually worth. I've been doing some calculating and I owe you about $400,000. I stared at the envelope. "James, that's not necessary. The judge already ruled on the settlement." "The judge ruled based on the numbers we had at the time. But I've learned more about your business since then, and I realized that half of everything would have been a lot more than what I was offering. You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything," he said quietly. "Sarah, I've spent the past 6 months thinking about our marriage and the man I was during those years. I was awful to you. You weren't awful. You were just limited in your understanding." "I was awful," he insisted. "I made you feel like you had to hide who you were to protect my ego. I treated you like a decoration instead of a partner. I planned to leave you with almost nothing while I rode off into the sunset with someone else." "James, please let me finish. I need to say this." He took a deep breath. "You were building an empire while I was building an affair. You were creating something that would change both our lives while I was planning to destroy the life we had. You were being everything I claimed I wanted in a partner while I was being everything I now know no woman should have to tolerate in a husband." I gestured for him to sit down. "How are things with Nicole?" James laughed bitterly. "Nicole broke up with me the day after the divorce hearing. Apparently, learning that I wasn't going to be as wealthy as she expected was a deal breaker." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It was the best thing that could have happened to me. It showed me exactly who she was and exactly who I'd become." "What do you mean?" "I'd become the kind of man who was attracted to someone who only valued me for my money. I'd become someone who needed to feel superior to the person I loved. I'd become someone who could plan to abandon his wife without any regard for her welfare. And now I'm in therapy. I'm trying to figure out how I became that person and how to make sure I never become him again." "That's good, James. Self-awareness is the first step." "Sarah, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you happy? During our marriage, when you were building your business in secret? Were you happy?" I thought about it for a moment. "I was happy when I was working. I was happy when I was using my brain and building something meaningful. But I wasn't happy in our marriage. Because of me. Because I couldn't be myself with you. Because I had to pretend to be less than I was to make you comfortable. I robbed you of 5 years of being yourself." "You didn't rob me of anything, James. I chose to hide who I was. I take responsibility for that choice. But you felt like you had to hide because of how I acted." "Yes, I did. I'm so sorry for that. I'm sorry for making you feel like your success was a threat to our marriage." "Thank you for saying that. There's something else I want to tell you. I ran into Linda Rodriguez last week at a networking event." "Oh." "She told me about the acquisition offer. The one from the New York firm." I smiled. "What about it?" "She said you turned down $50 million because you wanted to keep building your company independently." "That's right." "Sarah, you walked away from $50 million. I walked away from $50 million because I'm having fun building something that could be worth $100 million. James stared at me. $100 million? Maybe more. David Chin is expanding internationally, and he wants me to handle all his property acquisitions globally. We're talking about deals in London, Tokyo, Dubai. If everything goes according to plan, Mitchell and Associates could be the premier luxury real estate consulting firm in the world. That's incredible. It is incredible. And James, I couldn't have done any of this if I'd stayed married to you." "What do you mean?" "I mean that leaving our marriage freed me to stop hiding my ambitions. It freed me to think bigger, dream bigger, and build something without worrying about how it would affect someone else's ego. So in a way, I did you a favor by having that affair." "In a way you did." Though I wouldn't recommend adultery as a strategy for helping people reach their potential. James laughed, and for a moment he looked like the man I'd fallen in love with years earlier. Sarah, I want you to know that I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you've built and who you've become. Thank you. That means more to me than you know. I also want you to know that if you ever decide to date again, whoever you choose is going to be the luckiest man in the world. I'm actually seeing someone, I said. Really? What's he like? He's an architect. He designs luxury resorts and private estates. We met when I was consulting on a project in Napa Valley. Does he know about your business? He knows everything about my business. In fact, we work together sometimes. He's brilliant, and he challenges me to think differently about how properties can be designed to create experiences rather than just provide shelter. He's not intimidated by your success? Just the opposite. He's excited by it. He sees my achievements as something that makes me more interesting, not more threatening. That's how it should be. Yes, it is. James was quiet for a moment. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask this, but could you ever forgive me? Really forgive me? James, I forgave you months ago. Forgiveness isn't about you, it's about me. I forgave you so I could move forward without carrying anger and resentment. Do you think you'll ever be able to look back on our marriage as something positive? I already do. Our marriage taught me who I am and what I'm capable of. It taught me that I'm strong enough to build a life on my own terms. It taught me that I deserve to be with someone who sees my success as an asset, not a threat. It taught me the opposite, James said. It taught me that I wasn't ready to be married to someone extraordinary. Maybe you'll be ready next time. Maybe. If there is a next time. There will be. And James, when there is, I hope you'll remember what you learned from our marriage. What's that? That the right person will make you want to be better, not smaller. That love should inspire you to reach higher, not tear others down to make yourself feel taller. James stood up, leaving the envelope on my desk. Thank you for seeing me. And Sarah? Yes. The man you're seeing now, he's not just lucky. He's smart. Because anyone who could look at you and see anything other than an incredible woman worth fighting for would have to be an idiot. Like you were? Like I was. After he left, I sat in my office looking out at the Seattle skyline and thinking about the past year. I'd gone from being a woman hiding her success to being a woman celebrated for it. I'd gone from a marriage where I felt invisible to a relationship where I felt seen and valued. The divorce had been the best thing that ever happened to me, even though it hadn't felt like it at the time. My phone buzzed with a text from David Chin. The London property is perfect. When can we close? I typed back, I'll be there next week. Then I called my architect boyfriend, Michael, to tell him about the new project. How would you feel about spending a month in London? I asked when he answered. With you? I'd feel like the luckiest man alive. Good answer. As I hung up the phone, I realized that James had been right about one thing. Michael was lucky. But not because he was dating a successful woman. He was lucky because he was dating a woman who'd learned to value herself enough to demand the love she deserved. I opened my laptop and started planning my next acquisition. I had a business to run, an empire to build, and a life to live on my own terms. The best revenge, I discovered, wasn't destroying the person who'd hurt you. The best revenge was building something so amazing that losing you became the biggest regret of their life. James would spend the rest of his days knowing that he'd had a woman worth $30 million and had traded her for someone who wasn't worth 30 cents. And I would spend the rest of my days building something extraordinary with someone who appreciated the gift of loving a woman who knew her own worth. That, I thought as I reviewed the London property details, was justice in its most perfect form.